Solasta, Crown of the Magister, features a simple story and light writing, coupled with great quality of life features and tightly balanced combat encounters. These make for a very fluid experience during which you can focus on and enjoy the exploration and combat aspects of the game. It's nowhere near as grand in scope as the past two Divinities or the upcoming Baldur's Gate 3, but that only makes it the perfect in-between gameplay experience. Solasta, Crown of the Magister is a turn-based RPG based on the D&D SRD 5.1 rule set, which means that it's not the full D&D license, so there will be some limitations to the types of mechanics and features it will have. But the developers set their game in their own world, Solasta, with its own internal consistency, so they filled those gaps with their own stuff. The game looks great. It features a diverse amount of environments and really cool lighting effects in terms of the various sources of light that can exist in the game. And light is a major component of the game, but more on that in a bit. You can zoom in and out to a satisfactory level, and the cutscenes, at least in my experience, have been smooth and well made. There are a bunch of cutscenes, especially at the beginning of the game. Don't let that trick you though. Once you're onto the main quest line, the cutscenes will be fewer and of shorter length. Whenever you have to interact with NPCs, the dialogue will take place in such a cutscene mode, let's say. This is a bit hit and miss, seeing as how not every time you talk to the innkeepers requires a cinematic, but the occasional one makes an impact.
That's a change of mood.
Look, it works.
Who art thou?
What's going on here?
I have tried for years to open that door, and here you are.
One of the first things that made me like Solasta is that it limits your party to 4 characters. I don't know about you, but I think that's the perfect size for a party. It allows for a tank, a healer, a DPS, and a 4th, which is dealer's choice. You can roll with a support class, double down on the DPS, or take a hybrid class. 4 characters are also much easier to manage and to get involved with who and what they are, their stories and personalities and whatnot. That last part isn't that much of a thing in Solasta, since the story puts the player's entire party in the center of attention, as evidenced by how each member has a dialogue option when a conversation is triggered. You can choose to play with some of the pre-generated characters that the game comes with, or you can go ahead and create your own characters. Regardless of what you choose, the characters will have differing personalities depending on their backgrounds. There are also a bunch of character quests included that will trigger when you have members of a certain class and/or background. But that being said, Solasta doesn't offer you a lot of narrative agency. Whichever dialogue option you choose, you will always end up in the same place. On the other hand, it does offer you a lot of choice in terms of progressing your characters. Solasta seems to be a pretty good introduction to D&D's 5th edition for both laypersons as well as lapsed players like myself. There are a lot of things that changed from edition 3.5, which is back when I was deep into D&D. But most of the changes seem to have focused on streamlining the experience, nerfing the effects of critical roles, and replacing them with a less situational, although still situational, advantage/disadvantage mechanic. And even if none of what I said made any sense to you because you've never played D&D, the game's tutorial does a good job at explaining how things work. You'll still go through some trial and error and you'll need to experiment with things, but after some practice, the various systems and their quirks kind of fall into place. One of the things that sets Solasta apart from other implementations of D&D is its verticality. The combat encounters and the world at large are designed on several parallel layers, with many of your critter enemies being able to not only scale walls, which your characters can do as well, but they can also attack while holding onto the walls. This can lead to some fairly unique situations in which you'd think hitting down would offer you some sort of advantage, but within this rule system it doesn't. Verticality is not limited to scaling walls though, because a fair number of mobs can actually fly, and this creates untold amounts of issues for melee characters, because they won't be able to attack flying creatures depending on how far away they stay, of course. This is where having a ranged weapon as your secondary will come in extremely handy. There have been several encounters I could only finish because all the characters come with a light crossbow as a second weapon. And since I mentioned flying creatures, you should know that your characters can gain the ability to fly as well, either through potions or spells, so everything goes both ways. Similarly, with this verticality comes the opportunity to make use of the shoving and dropping giant boulder mechanics. These are highly situational, but when successful can help tremendously with an encounter. So verticality is the big eye-catching mechanic that Solasta boasts, and as I just described, it is baked into the gameplay experience at a fundamental level. But something even more fundamental than that is light and the ability to produce it. Light creating spells and items are crucial in the tabletop version of D&D. However, I think most mid-space DMs streamline their games to allow their players to focus on the story and adventure, as opposed to whether they can see at 6 squares in front of them, or 8 or 10 or more. Of course, I may be wrong, maybe I was the only DM who was lenient with their players in terms of light sources. But that was mostly because my spellcasters would take light as a cantrip and would cast it on the weapons of whoever was in front, and everyone who was holding a torch, we assumed, would throw it on the ground if a fight was about to start, so that they could use their hands for whatever their class needed them. Well, Solasta allows you to cast light on items on your person, well, on your character's person, and that's what clinched it for me. Also, the way in which you get to see the light shift depending on the character's movement is simply wonderful. There are several types of light spells and sources in the game. Some of them are harmless, while some of them can help you not only illuminate enemies, but also damage the bastards. There are quite a bunch of really cool quality of life type mechanics that the game features. First off, there's fast travel, which isn't anything new, but the way in which it is implemented is really cool. You get to see the world map as its details get colored in as you pass through them, and a detailed log of what is happening with the party on the left of the screen. You can fast travel on the location maps as well as the world map, but you can also see the locations and status of various receptacles, so it's a great way of seeing some chests that you might have missed or forgotten about. There's a really cool in-world mechanic that I hope gets borrowed by other CRPGs going forward: the scavenger mechanic. The scavengers are an in-game faction. There are 6 total factions, more on them in a bit, which basically do what their name says. They go into various places around the world of Solasta, pick up all the junk that is worth something, and then sell it. They tell you that once you clear a place, all you have to do is to visit any scavenger outpost, and a team will be reaching that place in a certain amount of time and pick up everything you didn't already. You'll get your pick of the spoils and sell the rest, getting a very nice chunk of change in the process. This makes town runs to unload loot completely obsolete. You'll still go to town to turn in quests, reputation awards and buy stuff, but not necessarily to unload loot, which I think is a stupendous idea that not only adds to the world building but also streamlines the gameplay. It's a design win-win. So about these factions. You have reputations with all of them, and these reputations improve as you do favors for them. For the scavengers and the local administration, these favors are generally quests, but for the other ones, these favors are various special items you find on your travels that they're interested in. The thing is, each of these special items is generally of interest to 2 or more of the factions, so you always have to make a choice which faction you wish to favor. Each of them offers access to super special items with high levels of reputation, things like either magical gear, recipes for potions and scrolls, gear you can use to enchant, that sort of jazz. You need to decide early which faction you want to max out first, because I don't know if you can max out more than maybe 2. Solasta's story is fairly by the numbers, meaning a very traditional style tabletop campaign. But that's not a bad thing, and you have to stick with me here for a bit. So yes, there is an ancient, now collapsed civilization whose ruins you get to explore, a likewise ancient magical cataclysm that led to that civilization's demise, a hidden threat that was thought eliminated as a result of the cataclysm unexpectedly showing up again, and the main questline is one gigantic fetch quest. It's neither dark nor angsty. No deep ruminations about the nature of humanity, no considerations for the duality of man. It's just a fun high fantasy romp. The dialogue doesn't take itself too seriously either, thus reflecting the IRL vibe.
You had to touch it. Find us a way back.
Friends, we'll have to think this through. We're a team.
And watch where you put your hands in the future.
Don't you loot everything you find?
Look, a farm. And another. High adventure, I love it.
Some headquarters. Dark cults aren't what they used to be. What? No tavern? That's suspicious for a start.
That was my line.
The dungeon design is very reminiscent of the tabletop as well. There are oftentimes dungeons with multiple levels, the occasional lever puzzle, and the developers engage in a bit of double and even triple dipping by having you revisit some locations with different side quests at later levels, upping the challenge of the enemies to match. The side quests are mainly of the go to this location and look for something type. However, there are a couple of standouts. One of them is a recurring side quest that will have you going to talk to some dude. Literally, just talk. Like you go there and you talk to him about the stuff you've seen and done. It's kinda like a weird mid-season episode from the time before streaming, when you would have a clip show, a clip episode in which you would have to catch people up to the things that's been happening in the show up until then. But there's also at least one pure D&D side quest in which you are tasked with finding the Temple of the Lost God.
Where's the temple?
Behind the mist.
We're through the mist.
My point is, even though the story is fairly basic, it is executed extremely well. It manages to summon the feel and spirit of a tabletop campaign, where you can spend time both dungeon crawling as well as exploring and investigating the world and its characters. But not everything is rainbows and unicorn blowjobs in Solasta. There are some very minor issues here and there that should be addressed as the game gets patched going forward. Even though the game spent quite some time in early access and it has now been officially released, you may still encounter a certain amount of bugs. Most of these bugs will be animation movement stuff, but nothing game breaking. However, occasionally you might have to reload to the beginning of a fight autosave because the Minotaur found an invisible treadmill. If you generate all your characters, you might get stuck with characters that have the same lines and or voices. And during some cutscenes, some characters will look a bit wonky or hunched over. Getting locked out of optional side quests because of failed rolls is a dick move and generally a sign of bad design. In the main quest, when you fail a skill roll during a dialogue, it usually leads to a fight which would have otherwise been avoided, but either way you still get to progress. There are at least a couple of side quests around the map that you will get completely locked out of if you fail the first skill roll. This could be easily fixed by allowing you to maybe try to approach the quest with a different skill roll or to retry the same roll once per day or once per week, but none of that. These quests are super minor, nothing truly game impacting whatsoever, but they are more a sign of a lack of time rather than bad design when we look at the entirety of the game. I think that these aspects are actually from an earlier version of the game in which you had more narrative impact, but most likely for reasons of time, budget, and in general deadlines, all of that had to be stripped from the game so that they could really focus on the combat aspect. Similarly, I don't know why you can't try to pick locks after you fail once, especially since there is nothing that tells you that you broke the lock or you broke your tools, and you can attempt the same lock with all of your party members. Again, a small thing that has an in-world workaround by taking the knock spell. Oh yeah, here's a tip for spellcasters: take sleep and knock.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for... what was it again? Stefan's Miscellaneous Musings. I don't know what a Stefan is. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna fire my agent.
That was weird. Solasta shows you the dice rolls. Solasta not only shows you the dice rolls for all attack, damage and skill rolls, but it has color-coded and theme-customized dice for each type of damage or skill. You can even change their look in the settings of the game. And this is more than just an aesthetic, cute visual choice. By showing you actual dice, on the one hand, it deepens the tabletop vibe that I was talking about earlier. On the other, it actually shows you that the game is not fudging with you. Any video game in which you have a percentage chance of hitting something, regardless of how that 2-hit chance is implemented or integrated, and you don't get to see the dice rolls that govern that action, you should assume it is fudging the rolls, and it's something that should not be a thing anymore. We need to see the dice rolls. Hear me, developers? The Razan encounter fucking sucked. Razan is a fairly powerful vampire you get to fight around the mid part of the story, potentially twice. The first time is part of the main quest, so cannot be avoided. The second time is optional, so I'm talking about the second optional fight. Your experience might vary, but it took me and my party around an hour to take the undead bastard down, because he would regenerate a lot and teleport away from my party. The footage you are seeing now is from the first unavoidable fight because I just didn't record the second one. There is nothing wrong, bugged or glitchy about the fight. Razan just sucks. Pun intended. So I'm letting you know beforehand, if you want to do the side quest, get yourself a long rest so you can have all your spells and abilities with you. You can imagine it was pretty fucking annoying if I decided to dedicate it a chunk of this video. I did not hate the lever puzzles. Those of you who are new here might not be aware of my deep dislike, let's call it, of lever puzzles. I made an entire video about this a couple of years ago, which you can find in the description and up here. So I'm on the record why I dislike lever puzzles in CRPGs and also how to make them work in your game if you really still want lever puzzles in it, which you shouldn't. And while I doubt any of the developers of Solasta watched my fuck lever puzzles video, it seems that we have a common vision as to how to make them work. There are only 3 major lever puzzles in the game, so on the one hand, don't overuse them. The first one is basically an entire floor of a necromancer's tower, which you have to visit because it is part of the main questline. That being said, the solution to the puzzle is given in the game, and all you have to do is to carefully navigate the floor's trap-laden layout and activate the various buttons in their correct order. The second one is a pretty cool semi-optional 3D puzzle, which takes place in the magical realm of a dragon's mind. I say semi-optional because you can pretty much skip spending a lot of time on it if you want to. You don't have to solve it in order to progress, but if you do solve it, you get some cool gear out of it. The third puzzle is maybe the toughest, and it is also completely optional, being part of a side quest. Just like with the first one, you can find the solution near the puzzle itself, you just have to interpret some stuff and engage in some trial and error. In the case of the first unavoidable puzzle, it does seem like something a crabby and paranoid necromancer would do, so it gets a pass from me. In the case of the second puzzle, it takes place in the mind of a dragon, so it gets a fair enough. In the case of the third optional puzzle, you can totally ignore it if you want to, so it doesn't really matter if I give it a pass or not, but I do. It doesn't make a lot of sense for it to exist there, but the way in which the solution is presented does, so it gets some points there. Solasta Crown of the Magister is an incredibly solid title from an indie developer who has nowhere near the amount of money or experience that Obsidian, inXile or Larian do. It is here to fill the fantasy D&D inspired CRPG gap between Divinity Original Sin 2 and Baldur's Gate 3. It also comes with a dungeon builder feature in which you can make your own dungeon encounters and share them with the community. I can't really tell you how well this feature works because I've never used it. Solasta is nowhere near the size and scope of those earlier mentioned games, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't try to be and it doesn't have to. Solasta is very well located in a CRPG niche where it can be enjoyed by people who really like getting into hardcore RPGs, like myself, as well as people who might not have that sort of time or mental bandwidth anymore, like some of my patrons, and who want a well-structured dungeon crawl without the actual need to keep track of parallel story, intrigues and companion plotlines. Sometimes you're just not in the mood to fuck around romancing the hot elf chick or dude instead of getting to the brass tacks of dungeon crawling. There are also lots of opportunities to expand the game going forward. The world is already there. filled with countless ruins on the map that you can see but not stop to explore. There is also the political intrigue aspect with the various factions and kingdoms which can be used, and we see a little bit of that at the very end of Solasta. The final cutscene sets up a war, and recently the developers, Tactical Adventures, said that they are expanding their studio and continuing to work on the world of Solasta. It definitely gets my nonsense seal of approval. Get it now, get it on discount, doesn't matter, just get it so you can have it. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you like it and also share it wherever you think it would make most sense. It would also be great if you gently tap that subscribe button, but absolutely pulverize the bell notification button. Checking out my Patreon page would also be deeply appreciated if you are in a position to do so. I've been Stefan. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day and see you next time.